Good morning, everyone. This is Diane Murray at Southern Art Gallery, and today I thought we would look at this introductory set of paints, watercolor paints from Qor. It comes just in a lovely package. Their marketing is top-notch, and it comes in this little box. It used to come in larger boxes, but they've gotten smaller. It actually has little mixing areas in the top of the tin, which, believe it or not, is really very practical. I'm just going to set that over there. It comes with 12 colors. As you can see, when I swatch these out, some pigments are better than others. This is a standard Hansa Yellow light, which is pretty much the same across any brand. We paint in my beginner's class and my advanced classes. We use a limited palette, so it's really important for me that a set has a warm and a cool yellow, a warm and a cool blue, and a warm and a cool red. I also like my sets to have burnt sienna and Payne's gray. And that's usually the 8 colors we start with in our beginners classes. This is Nickel Azo, which is my favorite warm yellow. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous warm yellow. And Qor's brand is pretty much the same as the other PY 150s I've used, so I'm very pleased with that. They include yellow ochre in this set, and I find that this is a color that I absolutely never use unless I'm doing flesh tones. I don't like the opacity of yellow ochre, but I know it's very frequently used by a lot of artists, so I do understand why it's in the set. And it is a good earth yellow, but I just don't happen to use it myself. This color is absolutely gorgeous. This is Quinacridone Gold Deep. It's actually PO 48. Where I think they dropped the ball on this set is their burnt sienna. It's really, and I use burnt sienna all the time, and I don't like this particular burnt sienna. I just don't like it. It doesn't have a nice granulation. It's kind of clumpy. I don't know how to describe it, but it's not a great burnt sienna, but it's okay if you're a beginner and you're just learning about watercolor. I think it's probably fine, but it's definitely would not be one that I would buy. Their Payne's gray is a nice Payne's gray. My very favorite Payne's gray is Daniel Smith's Payne's blue gray and the Payne's gray by Senoyer. Now this is a color I've never used before. For some reason I never have red oranges on my palette. I can't explain why that is, but this is a nice red orange, this Pyrrol Red light. So I think that's a good choice for our warm red. Also, Pyrrol Red would be an excellent choice for a warm red, and that's the one I usually recommend. This is Quinacridone Magenta, which is PR 122, which is my favorite, and Qor makes a beautiful Quinacridone Magenta. I actually use Qor's Quinacridone Magenta in my own palette. So it's excellent pigment there. This permanent alizarin crimson, that is, I'm not even sure where, oh, there it is. See, you can easily mix out of these little wells. You can't do a large painting, but you could actually carry this with you if you went somewhere. This particular permanent alizarin crimson, this PR 177, is not my favorite permanent alizarin crimson, but again, for a beginner set, I think it's just fine. And the cost on this set is quite reasonable for 12 pigments. Of course, the tubes are only, I think they're 5 milliliter tubes. This is their ultramarine blue, which is a really nice ultramarine blue. I have no problem with it. I really like Qor's paints. Of course, they're made in America, so they are less expensive for us. Not necessarily if you're in Europe, they're probably much more expensive for you than for us. So I'm really happy that they include the ultramarine and the phthalo blue. I'm really happy that they include the Hansa Yellow and the nickel azo. And these two reds, although I would replace this with a Pyrrol Red, because that's just a red that I tend to use more. And the last color they have is a color that I never use, and it's called Viridian. And it's very similar, it's a granulating version of, that's similar to PG7, which is a phthalo green. But it does, these two make a nice turquoise if you mix them together. So there you have it. There's their 12 colors. Now, if I were designing this palette, which of course I didn't, but if I were, I would replace this permanent alizarin crimson with one of my favorite Qor colors. It is called Pyrrol Red Deep. This is my favorite dark red. It is made by Qor. I use it all the time, and it is absolutely gorgeous. I would replace the Viridian with their Sap Green, which is also the Sap Green that I use on my palette, which I think is an absolutely gorgeous sap green. I've tried lots of different sap greens since Daniel Smith stopped making their famous sap green, or they changed the formulation of it. So this is the sap green I would choose. This is the Pyrrol Red I would choose for the alizarin crimson. And in place of the yellow ochre, since I just do not like yellow ochre, I would put a raw sienna, because raw sienna is a nice earthy color. It's a dark earthy yellow, but for me it's much more practical. I use it all the time, and this is just my recommendation. And that is not, I don't have Qor's raw sienna, so this is Daniel Smith's raw sienna. But that's what I would replace on this particular introductory set. Or after I used these colors up, and my students use these colors up, I would replace them with this combination. So let's mix some colors and see how they mix. Let's take the Quinacridone Gold. Let's move this over here. I will tell you that mixing in these tiny little wells, it's very easy for your colors to get contaminated. So you have to be really careful. I would only use this like I'm using as an example here, or if I were traveling, I might use that. Otherwise, it's not really what I would use. You actually could take these with you on a trip though, which I think is kind of neat. And I'm going to just basically let these mingle together so we can get an idea of how they work together. Of course, Qor doesn't use gum arabic as their binder. They use a binder called Aquazol, which is proprietary to Qor. And I really can't tell a difference other than the fact that the colors do spread much more rapidly. You can see how they blossom out, which can be a nice effect. But if you're working in a tight area, it might be something that you really don't like about them. They're probably a bit more difficult to control. That's one thing I do when I'm testing colors. I always try to make the neutrals, and I combine them together to see how they're going to work together. It's very important because we mix a lot in our classes, so you have to have nice pigments that play well together. All right, while that's settling out, we will try another combination. So Let's try another one that I particularly like, and that's Nickel Azo and Payne's Gray, which makes a really lovely dark green. And as you can see how it spreads. This is typical of Qor paint. It really, really bursts. And this is how I test my paints to see if they're going to do what I want them to do. I just move it around, and if it's not moving enough, just spritz it a little bit. I find that this works better than actually mixing them on the palette to test them, because I tend to overmix them when I do that, so I like doing it this way better. And it really shows you if they're going to granulate, how they're going to perform, and how they're going to mix well with other paint. All right, let's try some more. These are just common mixes that I use all the time. That's Quinacridone. Let's wet it first. And this is a synthetic brush that I'm using, so we may not be getting enough water on here. That might be part of the problem. And there you go. There's the Quinacridone magenta exploding. And let's get the phthalo blue, and there's the phthalo blue exploding. It's really fun to watch Qor paints. I have to say, they are really fun to watch. They really are. And they're fun to play with. And if you're new to watercolor, it's all about having fun and learning and experimenting. This is really a lovely color combination also. Let's see if we can get it to get a nice violet. I'm looking for a nice violet. Okay, and the last one I wanted to try was to see if we could get an orange out of this. Because obviously you're not going to get everything you need in an introductory set. They do have a lovely set that's called High Chroma, which was one of the first Qor sets I bought, and absolutely love it. Love that set. So this was the Pyrrol Red, and there it goes again. Just going everywhere. That's the Pyrrol Red, and let's get the Hansa Yellow. Let's see if we can get a nice orange in here. And just drop some in there. Let's see what we get. See if we can see what kind of orange we're going to get from that. We are getting a nice orange. And of course, if you wanted it to be a brighter orange, you could always add more red. Overall, I think it's really a nice set for beginning students, and I would highly recommend this set if you are a beginning watercolorist. I wish Qor would make some changes in the introductory set, though. I wish they'd do something about their burnt sienna. So I hope you found this helpful, and if you are, even if you're not a beginning watercolorist, this is a fun little introductory set to play with, and I think it's a very good value. So I would say give Qor a try, and if you're just shopping for a Sap Green or a Pyrrol Red Deep, go for these colors. They are absolutely stunning. And I hope you found this helpful, and we will see you soon.